Hello and welcome to episode 5 of
The Complete Charting Guide.
So I mentioned in episode 1 that I wanted to have some kind of homework for this series, and so starting this video, I will have it now. In the description, I have a link to 5 tempo mapping practice audios that I prepared, and if you want to follow along, the one I'll be using is Tempo Mapping Practice 3. Anyway, I have 2 essays that I need to write for school that I've been putting off, so let's get this video done with quickly. So before I get into it, what is tempo mapping? Tempo mapping is lining up the BPM of your chart to match the BPM of the song. This is not optional, and it must be done for your song or else it's going to look super sloppy, and if you try to get any feedback on it in the Clone Hero Discord, I guarantee the first thing you'll just hear is make sure it's tempo mapped, then we can talk. Alright, welcome to Moonscraper. First thing you're going to do is go to Song Properties, Audio, and Load right here, the first one next to Song Audio. All you're going to do is go to where you downloaded your files that you want to work on, which I downloaded it to desktop. I'm going to use Tempo Mapping Practice 3 and hit open. There it is. And it should be loaded in now, and you can tell it is because at the top right, it no longer says no audio. It just shows the time. Before we actually start talking about tempo mapping, go to your waveform and set it to song. This will now show the wave file on your highway. Notice how the wave file does not start at the very beginning. It starts over here at this, lines up with this first measure. Because remember, when we set up our audio, we put 2 seconds of silence in. If it's exactly 2 seconds, then it's going to line up perfectly right here. But if it doesn't, then there is a fix. What you're going to do is put down a BPM marker right here and hold Ctrl, right click. And you're just going to drag your mouse and you can bring it to be exactly where it needs to go. So let's say this wasn't lined up at first. I can just drag it right to the beginning of the wave file. Right about there. Looks about right. And I can check over here. Yep, 120.184. I already know the correct answer is 120 to get this to line up. So that's actually pretty close. So I already know it's lined up though. So 120 is good. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to Tools and BPM Calculator. How handy? Well, it does not actually calculate it for you. It just helps you to calculate it. So what's going to happen is you're going to play the song. And you're going to tap along to the beat. Hey, it's me from the future again. And I realized I forgot to say something pretty important. That is, how do you actually hear the beat? When you're listening for the beat, you're really listening for the drums. There's going to be 3 main things you're listening for. First is the kick, the snare, and the cymbal, which will be a hi-hat or a ride cymbal, or just any other crazy cymbal that the drummer is using. Generally, what is going to happen is on the first beat, or on the thick white lines in Moonscraper, will be the kick. Then on beat 2 will be the snare. Beat 3 will be a kick, and beat 4 will be a snare. Sometimes it'll be just beat 1 is a kick, and beat 3 is a snare. And then usually on all beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, or sometimes also in between those, will be the cymbal keeping time. So let's hear a few different beats and I'll count along with them to show you what I mean. So I'm going to start with kick on beats 1 and 3 and snare on beats 2 and 4. Then I will do kick on beat 1 and snare on beat 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just because the kick and snare are slower does not mean the hi-hats have to be slower. Here's an example of that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are simplified versions of beats. So usually you aren't going to hear it be so simple. You might hear additional kicks, additional snares, or some things going on with the cymbals, maybe some other kind of drums thrown in there. But usually at the foundation of all beats is going to be that pattern. So if you listen out for that, that's what you're going to be tapping along to. If it's way too hard to hear where the beat is, or it's too messy, you might be dealing with an uncommon time signature, and then you're going to need to look at the advanced tempo mapping guide for that. But for now, all of these examples are not going to require that. So let's do it. So it says about 147, maybe it's 146.5. Sometimes they can be decimals like that. And realize that the more times you tap, or as in the longer that you keep on doing this, the more accurate it's going to get because it has more data to go off of to make this number. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the very beginning of the wave file right here. Do not change this BPM marker or anything. This is setting up that this lines up. So you're going to grab this one. You're going to set it to what you think it is. What was it again? 147. So let's just try 147. And now, how can we tell if this is correct or not? Well, what you want is all the drum hits, which are these spikes, to line up exactly with the lines, like how the first one does. So there's a spike here. There's a tiny spike here. A spike here. So it looks like it might be correct. Now, if you really want to be sure, you can turn on the metronome and then play the song and hear if that lines up. It sounds like it's about right, so this should be the correct tempo. Now, what does it look like when you're slightly off? So let's say I was at 149 instead of 147. So it looks like it's lined up. Spike here, but you notice the wave, these spikes and the lines are slowly starting to come apart from each other. And the farther you go into the song, the more it becomes desynced. So in this case, if you think you're almost correct and it's just slowly drifting, you can try playing around with it. I like to drag all the way out and look at it. And then when you do this, it's going to be very obvious how it's moving. So you can see I'm moving it this way, and it looks like it's going more and more off. So I go minus, and looks like that lines up, and then that might be correct. Sometimes the tempo might change in your song. So for example, if it's correct, but then suddenly over here, it starts to veer off, you notice. Like imagine this wasn't here and you just starts to veer off. You're going to have to find where it starts to desync and then recalculate the tempo by just using the BPM calculator again. But for the section that has the different tempo. Besides that, there's not much else to talk about. Again, there's 5 tempo mapping practices for you guys to practice with in the description, and I'll give you a tip. Number 5 is harder than the rest, and it has multiple BPMs for you to find. And thank you for watching. Next video, I'll go over the theories behind placing sections and how to name them. Up to this point, the videos have been pretty simple and beginner friendly, but starting next video, things are going to start to ramp up in difficulty, and you might actually have to take notes to remember it. Anyway, until then, happy charting.